Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll just let people get into the Zoom room here. Today, Heather and Ladybird, two of the counselors at Mental Health, are going to be talking about navigating relationships. And I'm going to hand it over to them directly after I do a little bit of level setting. So they're going to talk, we're going to go through some slides, we're going to talk about some concepts, some ideas, and throughout that, you can type into the chat what you're thinking or if you have a question. And then the other thing you can do after we've gone through the slides is you can talk to us. You can ask a question or share your experience, and you can do that in two ways. You can click the raise hand button and we'll unmute you and you can chat with us and ask your question. And if you'd prefer to not do that, you can type it into the questions and I will read it aloud for you. So two options. And again, chat totally open if you just have anything that you kind of want to riff off of as Heather and Ladybird go through this. We're super excited. I am super excited about this conversation and really happy to have y'all here. So I will go to this first, an intro, first slide, and hand it over to Heather and Ladybird.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sophia, and thank you, Ladybird. I'm grateful to be here with you, with everybody. I know that even coming to this topic of intimate relationships, how we relate in times of serious illness and death and dying, like I want to name a kind of like humility that I bring to the entire topic because this is such a big topic and it sits in the most like inner sanctum of our hearts and the way that we know ourselves, and it's complicated by some of the deepest beauties and the deepest pains that we can experience in relationship happen precisely in the space that we're going to be giving attention to today. So I really want to make a sense of space and permission for your experience, my experience not looking the same way, and that this is a conversation, not a didactic of, here's what you need to do or how to be, rather a space in which we can touch into some of the complexities, the nuances around what it means to be in intimate relationship with ourselves and others, and some of the rawest, most vulnerable times of our lives. And I know that relationships of these kind can also be a space of a lot of unhealed stories. And we may or may not be currently in a romantic or intimate relationship of this kind. It may evoke histories, traumas, pain, sadness, grief, that even if you are presently solo, single, it can have a lot of nuance to it. And I also want to honor that there's no one way to do this, right? Like, even if we language this in terms of intimate relationship, it may include marriage, it may not include marriage. It may, there are queer expressions of love. There are unmarried, polyamorous expressions of love that are not going to look the same as what we might consider like this kind of a heterosexual nuclear family ideal. And what we bring to the social expectations around grief, and whether we make that safe for others, for ourselves, if we have places of belonging, if we have places of safety in which we can be our authentic selves, is not the same for everybody. So I want to just be able to offer that as we begin. And there is a chat feature here. You can raise your hand, of course, to check in, ask questions, express, whatever is maybe coming up for you. And we'll try to hold all of that with the intention of making this a welcoming, safe space to explore some really tender spaces.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Heather. I feel so welcomed myself just with your words. And yeah, I also want to share. My name is Ladybird and one of the counselors here as well. And Heather and I and Sonia, actually, the three of us together, were talking about how so many of the folks we care for, they sometimes arrive to Metal individually, maybe on their own, or someone's referred them or recommended that they come and meet with us. But they're not living in a bubble. And so what happens pretty quickly is we start to interact with them and the people who they're relating to. So sometimes it's the intimate partner that they're the relationship that's important, but there's a lot of other people involved in someone's life. Even if you say you have 5 people in your life or 2 people in your life, those people are connected to other people who are connected to other people. And we're just very connected, even in moments where we feel completely isolated. There is a web around us of human beings that have interacted with us. Natalie, I mean, Heather, what you're saying about even if we're not in a partnership right now, but this conversation evokes certain thoughts or feelings or memories about past relationships. That's part of the web, or the people seen and unseen. So relationship conversations can seem really obvious and simple, like, oh, right, what do I have to do to show up for my partner who is sick? Or how do I show up for myself? Or how do I show up for the couple? But then there's just slowing that down a little bit and spreading it out a little bit to understanding what it actually means to be relating to each other and relating to ourselves, not fixing it or making it better or doing it right. And there, for me, what I experience is a lot of tenderness, a lot of grief, a lot of places where I feel like in my own life, maybe I haven't gotten it right. I didn't do it quite right. I missed the boat, or wish I had done something differently. And so when illness presents itself and then their time becomes very finite, and sometimes we even have a structure to how much time we have left, the pressure around how we relate can feel really insurmountable. So Heather and I really wanted to be able to just talk about some of these beauties, some of the beauty of what it means to be in relationship while we're navigating serious illness, and some of the challenges actually that arise that we've experienced in ways that we have supported people, and um, bringing some normalcy to it, I guess, is the hope. That it isn't we're all doing this already. We're already doing it. We're all experiencing it and experiencing it in so many different ways. So yeah, maybe let's go to the next slide. Which brings, I mean, I think to just opening this conversation, Heather, when we were starting to talk about it, we started listing like, oh yeah, there's the shared personal, like let's just be very, a couple, 2 people have been together for a while and one person becomes sick with an illness that isn't going to be cured. There's something that you're sharing together that's between the two of you that a lot of other people don't have access to. Then there's the role of the caregiver and the experience that the caregiver is going through that's a little bit different. Now, it's actually a lot different than what the person with the illness is going through, what the patient is going through. And then sort of the external world. So all of the ways that we relate to our community as a couple, how the world relates to us as a couple, how we relate individually. So there's all these, once we started talking about it and thinking about, like, how do we want to speak about this? We realize that there are just a lot of different avenues to consider. And that is actually really helpful to recognize that it's not just one experience. It's not just, oh, my partner is sick and this is happening. There are a lot of other relationships that are also happening. Does that sound more complicated, Heather? I'm appreciating you nodding, but I'm wondering if I'm
No,
making it.
it is, I think that's one of the things I really better understood uh, as I've worked with, couples and, people in partnership, this sense that you are going through something that may be the most life-changing, life-threatening, destabilizing experience in some ways of your life. And you're going through that together, and you're also going through that in radically individual ways.
Yeah.
There's the person living with a diagnosis, And that is going to be a radically different experience than, you know, being a loved one, a witness to, a caregiver in that, you know, relationship. So there's these points of connection that are absolutely shared, and then there's places that are other, you know,
Yeah.
that you actually aren't going to be able to share, which can be, I think, alienating, isolating, sad sometimes. And there's also ways in which like the whole like kind of universe of our relationships, right? Like that
Mhm.
may or may not be shared, you know, from our families of origin, past relationships, sibling relationships, friendships, like everything is touched by, you know, this encounter with serious illness. So, you know, this is not like a linear conversation at all about, you know, there's one experience over here and another experience over here. It really, um, it does feel that complex with the shared and the unshared parts of this experience.
Yeah, and I'm wondering now as we're talking about it, I feel like it's partially because of the anticipation of loss, right? When you think about shared, unshared, we can the analogy of a parent and a child. You know, you're raising a child to a certain point, you're completely entwined, you're sharing so much life, everything's together, but you're starting to actually separate in some ways. But there's a emancipation in that. There's an expectation of that being a positive thing, even though it can be hard. With the separation with terminal illness and death, it's a completely different experience. And so you're anticipating this loss that you're not going to be able to recover or feel differently. And so there's almost more of an urgency around trying to see the places of connection
Yeah.
and wanting to see those places of connection the way that we saw them before, right? And now in this moment, now you're in this new territory, the places of connection are still there. They might appear differently, they might feel different, they might um, be experienced differently, but they're still there. And I think that's the real edge, is really being able to experience those places of connection that still exist, that do exist. And sometimes I have had folks share with me that they just feel so, they don't know how to be. They don't know what to
Yeah.
say. They don't know if there's actually still love there. And both sides are saying this in different ways, right? Because of what you said, Heather, it's like you're physiologically going through this in a different place. So trusting, I think the first thing that I want to say that feels so important to me is before trusting that the relationship that was there before the illness came is still there. And on that playing field to then remember, oh, right, this is this person that X, Y, and Z, which can also include this is that person that I was feeling really distant from even before the illness came, right? Which is one of those added complexities.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important and wise insight, Ladybird, about, you know, there's an essentially different task happening around this experience of separation and the anticipation of loss and the experience of loss in our own bodies, the experience of like the physiological changes, and that sense of reaching for connection and yet not being on the same ground as you were,
Yeah.
you know. And so there's a way of if there's been areas where you couldn't connect in the past, it may be even more amplified, you know. It may be or if there is this really like wonderful delicious way that you may have connected in the past, it may not be available in the same way. So even the reaching for can bring up grief, you know, or
Yeah.
even the acknowledgement of wanting that connection can bring up grief and loss, and it won't feel like it did, even if there's a goodness or a beauty to it now. It won't feel like it used to, and that can bring up pain too. So that it's the anticipation of loss, I think, really can
Mhm.
pull us out of the moment very often, and it's very normal to feel um, Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to the next slide?
Hmm. Yeah, because we're kind of touched into there a little bit. This
And
image
this is
is,
already, yeah, yeah.
oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Heather.
oh no, no, you too. The image is very moving.
It's very compelling. It's very, to me, it feels so apropos to this element of being together and being an individual, being together and being an individual, and the water moving by. I mean, imagine that's water. That's what my mind is doing. Um, that things are always changing. And so the truth in a relationship is that for the most part, it is kind of shifting ground from day to day. We don't always acknowledge that until all of a sudden something sort of like really startles us and we realize, wow, this doesn't feel the same as it used to. That's kind of always how it is. But illness really brings that to the forefront. And um, there are these expectations that we have of sort of getting it right when we have the illness, right? That we need to somehow reverse everything and make it right. And what's happening physiologically for a person with a terminal diagnosis is not the same thing that's happening physiologically for a person who's in the caregiver role, in the partnership role. And so that those threads of separation are starting to happen just in our bodies. And that's sometimes part of the tension that starts to arise as we feel different. And that can't really be hidden by our intimate partnerships, right? We know each other so well, and that difference we can feel through our bodies. So that's like the first layer that happens. And then our emotions start to really shift. How I feel about dying and leaving the planet is different than how you feel about staying, saying goodbye to me, and continuing with the life that's there for you, right? And so slowly, slowly, these webs of connection that we're still connected, but we're starting to have these different experiences within that connection. And I like to remind people that there is a physiological element to it. It's not just you somehow having the wrong emotions or not understanding enough or not being um, understanding enough or gracious enough or all of the pieces that we sort of carry around judgment, trusting that there's actually something happening and our bodies are leading the way, actually saying, we're going to make it a little bit uncomfortable for you so that you can start to match this path maybe a little bit. That makes sense. And usually we don't want to, right? We don't particularly want to say goodbye to someone. We're not really ready to die. So it's not a chosen path.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a chosen path. Heather, you've
What I hear you
spoken
saying,
about this time and space difference too around the liminal space. You know, you've had some really beautiful experiences
well,
with people having that. Could you say a little bit about?
I know, I really, as I was hearing you talk, Lady Bird, I was having this sense of this, it's kind of paradoxical that, and I've heard it said more than once from people living with terminal illness, approaching their own death, that there has been a kind of this really bittersweet pain that can arise in this experience of like losing that shared reality. You kind of enter into more of an awareness sometimes of how much love there may have always been all along. Like I've heard it said more than once, like I didn't know how loved I was. I
Mm,
didn't know how much I was loved. And to let in this place of love where we may have had resistance. I think it's really normal for us. We're in these like mundane everyday realities. We've had our fights, our differences, our almost sometimes intractable places of not being able to join another person's reality, even sharing the same house. It's
mm,
in health, we don't always share the same realities. And sometimes there's such a in our vulnerability, in our letting go in some ways of those strict sorry, I lost my earphone, that we lose a sense of some of the separation too, not just between ourselves and others, but between time and reality. So there's a lot of almost like dreamlike
mm,
experience that can happen towards the end of life. Uh, And so it's harder to show reality because your person may be entering into that dreamlike space, and they're going to be saying things that seem just factually wrong.
Mhm.
Like they are seeing things or remembering things that just did not happen in this consensus reality, and yet may have a kind of meaning or a value that we can join in. I think this happens a lot of times with dementia.
Mhm.
If we're able to somehow join their story or join their experience, there's like an emotional coherence in it that
Mhm.
maybe is not available to us otherwise. So I'm trying to think of, you know, examples I've seen that would feel maybe within my permission to share.
Mhm.
But it would have to be in that place of, as we are letting go of one reality, what are we opening up to? And it may be that we're not ourselves, and yet we become connected in a different way to like a source of love or a source of mystery that
Mhm.
still allows us to connect to the beauty, the miracle of like this moment, which then sometimes is not available to us in mundane everyday like life. Does
Yeah.
that make kind of, I'm reaching for
No,
words.
no, it makes sense. And I mean, I think this is where it gets so complex. You know, there isn't just one example or one way. I mean, there's so many ways that we have intimate relationships with people. And, you know, there are a lot of people that have relationships that cannot even express their love for each other, right? The whole LGBTQ community and people that feel that their relationships are secretive and so that don't even get support in the expression of their love, then finding a place to grieve this change that's happening in this sort of secret expressive place. I mean, there's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah.
And so finding a way to sort of simplify it, and we can even move to the next slide because I think it sort of might even speak to this a little bit of um, yeah, kind of finding ways to rethink these places of tension and friction, right? That, oh, it needs to look like this. I need to connect in this way. I need to um, maintain a certain type of relationship to this person that was so close to me, and that maybe doesn't feel so close anymore. An example that I can think of that is quite a while ago, but it still was really poignant to me was, you know, a married couple. They'd been married for quite a while, and they were each other's third partners, each of them. So they had had other loves and other relationships and children. So two people with very full lives met each other, fell in love, had this life together, and then one of them developed dementia, and the other one didn't. And they were in their 80s by the time this happened. And what ended up needing to happen for caregiving reasons was the person with dementia ended up going to a facility. And it was the man, and the female, the woman stayed home. And a lot of what we talked about, and while he went to the facility, initially he was mad and upset, but then very quickly got acclimated to this new reality, which was shocking for everyone to see. He became further and further away from everyone. He was genuinely interested in seeing us when we showed up, but didn't really necessarily know who anybody was. And he met a new person at the facility who was also had dementia, and they developed a very sweet friendship. They would hold hands together. And initially, of course, it was heartbreaking for his wife to see this. But we talked about again and again and again back in her home with all of the stories and the pictures of your life was real. Your life happened. It absolutely existed. It still exists, and being able to hold on to these places of connection that exist when things start to unravel and feel really different. And so like I guess that word of rethinking, it's like it's not even so much denial or control, it's just letting ourselves feel the grief of the change. Oh, this is really not what I imagined it to be. This is really not something that I like, actually. I don't even know that I want to be in the story right now. I'm not sure how I can even hold this and experience it. So Yeah, I kind of went off on a different tangent, Heather, but I was trying to think of an example of that sort of that where that shift is different. And so when we would go to visit, I guess I'll come back to the other point of how do we reconnect? Instead of saying to him, "Hey, I'm your wife. Who is this person over there? What are you doing?" She didn't do that. We just went and we experienced whatever he wanted to share with us that day. This new person that was in his life who he was so excited about. And as hard as that was, there was also a sweetness. And you mentioned that, like that bitter sweetness of like, oh, this is the truth of what happens in life. This is the truth of the circle of a relationship, right? It has a cycle, which we don't always get to see.
No, and it is so bittersweet. And I also hear this like this mystery of how we sometimes love defies logic and rationale. Like I remember once also with a individual living with dementia, pretty advanced, but had a moment of clarity one day and asked, how will I love them when I am gone? And that question just always stayed with me as this like expression of how there may be a way in which our deepest yearning to love transcends even like, you know, our cognitive decline and our bodily decline. And there's something that yearns for this connection. So when I hear too this man who developed this connection with another resident there who wasn't his wife, I'm also wondering if she was able to sort of behold like the loving nature of her husband, that it doesn't belong to her in
Yeah,
a way that is so painful to it's so painful to surrender or to let go of
yeah,
when this is your person.
yeah,
And beneath that is this very loving heart, this loving spirit that continues to want to find intimacy and connection at every moment.
yeah.
Um, doesn't mean it won't be enormously difficult, painful to witness. And so I just think that was really what an enormous statement of her love for him.
And it wasn't easy,
No,
right? It's not, and I don't know that it's about that, but there's
yeah,
just even that notion of the individual's capacity for freedom, right? Our individual expression of life, of love moving through us manifests in relationships, but that's not the only manifestation. That's a really kind of advanced way to think about relationships, right? We don't tend to think about our relationships in that way. It's sort of like how we're immediately connected and that sense of feeling abandoned or not enough, or it's very powerful. They're very powerful feelings, and they can merge. There are ways that we actually do experience the both and. There aren't a lot of places to talk about it. There's not a lot of people that ask, "Wow, how are you feeling? Are you feeling a sense of, I don't know, even excitement or joy for your partner who's going to be kind of freed from this struggle that they're in, right?" And that to be able to experience the both emotions inside of us and talk about it with people, we tend to usually just talk about a couple of different layers of how we're feeling about things: the grief, the sadness, the exhaustion, the overwhelm of caregiving. But there are other elements there too. And I mean, even before we switch slides, I just want to name that, mental health is really good. I think about really not even using that word denial, just thinking it more as like a titration, that whatever we're looking at or not looking at, we're looking at in gradations of what we feel capable of tolerating in any moment, right? And so to use the word denial, um, I support people sort of rethinking that and really thinking about it more as like, what is it that I'm capable of right now? Understanding, holding, expressing, experiencing, and it might not be what people expect of me or is expected in this moment. So before the slide moved, I wanted to just make sure to name that, because denial is kind of prominent there and it can stir up a lot of emotions. But let's move to the next ones. Yeah, we were moving into this a little bit about these other ways of being together. Like, what does it mean to recognize our being togetherness?
Mhm. And it's so dynamic, and it's deeply personal, and I think often felt in the moment, maybe, but not always reachable, right? So it's this very the intention can be there, the hope can be there, but it may be a lot of experimentation. It may be a lot of missed connections, and developing a capacity to sit with um, our limits, the days that we're too tired, the days that we're too sad, we're too frustrated, scared, we just don't feel well enough to try to be together. And so what is this like baseline that we can do that? And is it, you know, enjoying sleep together, trying to sleep together, you know, just being able to rest in the same moment, breathe in the same moment. A very like simple sensory experience of togetherness rather than like a sense of some ideal state in which we are now totally relating and understanding each other. But
Yeah, finding new places. Sometimes they're silent. Sometimes there's without words. And sometimes it involves asking for help, right? To do some of the pieces that maybe are taking you into a role, especially for caregivers of intimate partners that are now doing the personal care and the cleaning and the arranging of medications and appointments and all of the things that turn you into more of a technical person for your partner, can really also start to rub against those edges in a way that wears you down. You know, it sort of takes away that softness that you have and that even that desire to connect in those other moments because you're just exhausted and depleted, and also witnessing parts of life ending that are hard to witness, and holding it in a way that you feel like maybe you can't express it because you need to show up in this moment for your partner. So being together can sometimes mean needing to reach out to your external community to get a little bit more support, maybe find a home health aide or find somebody at the hospice or whatever it is that isn't happening, seeing if maybe a little more can happen so that you can step back into a little more of that role of a partner, and whatever that means for you, because sometimes we just don't have the space to even find out what that other space could be, especially if you have a lot going on, if you have little kids in the house. It can be, there are a lot of pieces to what being together can look like. And just like if you were healthy and in a relationship where you were forgetting how to be together, and somebody has to sit you down and say, no, you need to have a date night. You need to make this a priority, even though you've been married for 25 years, you think you already know how to do it. You've forgotten, you've gotten into a routine. And the same thing is true when there's serious illness involved. You know, I think, again, this expectation that we know how to do everything perfectly. We get to learn again and again how to be together and finding new ways. And yeah, all I can say is every single person who has, I've had the honor of supporting and being with, they have found their way to find those pieces of togetherness, and it just didn't look like what they thought it would. And it surprised both of them, actually.
Can I interrupt that thought with a question and observation? I feel like what we hear from clients and just in my own experience is when time is limited, there's a feeling of I need to make this moment special, different, memorable. This birthday needs to be extra. This whatever moment needs to be extra. Just kind of thinking about that as a concept and what people go through and maybe a
Yeah,
reframe of it or how to think about that because I think it's common.
yeah,
yeah, and I think we put so much pressure on ourselves in some ways in those moments, understandably, to like sort of want to hold on to and to create memories and to like take advantage of every moment that we have together, that it becomes then almost the stress of making every moment matter and every anniversary, like in every celebration, be even more special, even more significant. And I think there's sometimes, like, you know, like what Ladybird you're describing is this like unexpected creative space we open to of finding another way to do it, you know, where we find something that wasn't available to us before. And I really believe there's something about trusting your connection, your love for each other will show a way to honor that experience without having
Mhm.
to attach some kind of like, sometimes it is absolutely the right thing or the right moment to be able to do something very intentional with community, for birthdays or anniversaries or what have you. And other times that it might be that you are ordering dinner from your favorite restaurant for takein and you just have a quiet moment together, you know, because you had some family come and get the kids for the night and you could just be together without any other, you know, no one else kind of asking for your attention. And so I don't know if you might add more to that, Lady Bird, but I think there's a real sense that at least I really love legacy projects. I love,
Mm.
you know, trying to have ritual and celebration be part of our lives together. And I also think there can be a way that it takes us away from the pleasure and the beauty of the simple ways of being together
Mhm.
that are what actually we're celebrating. That's actually those points of commemoration and celebration. Curious what you think about that too, Lady Bird.
Yeah, I think about again, the both and, right? It's like, again, we're in this, especially in these moments like, oh, okay, your partner has 3 months left to live, and all of a sudden the pressure feels like it's on you to make every moment count and do all the right things and tie up all the loose ends. And there is an importance to that. Like this is not, it's not wasted effort. And I would support resting in the other moments of finding the places where, you know, when you're both in a space where um, the bed's been changed, like sheets are clean, chemo's not happening, like you feel like you actually feel like a sensual person, like you don't mind somebody smelling your cheek, right? And remembering the smell of each other, being able to be near each other, just sitting down and holding hands, or just even laying, if it's not even comfortable to hold hands, to just be in the shared space. When I think back to people that I have loved dearly that I have lost, yes, of course, I remember certain moments of celebrations or experiences that we had that are fun and wonderful. And there's usually a picture or something to help me with that memory. But what I really carry with me is the presence of that person, what my grandmother smelled like, what her arm smelled like to me. I will never forget, because I took a lot of time with my face on my grandmother's arm, and I can remember how nourishing that felt. And so for me, what comes into my mind is that we're such relational beings, and we're relating to the being of that person. Then it has all these stories around it, around activities and events and rituals that help us get back to the actual being of the person. So whatever your touchstones are that you can create for yourself to be back in that intimate space of connection, right? Which is very intimate. The smell of my grandmother's arm, I'm not going to talk about that, you know, with everybody. I can do this on this call because we're in a shared space, but that's a personal experience. And I think that's also makes it more, um, it carries a different quality of meaning, because it's something that I get to have. And so going back to the earlier part of the conversation, where when somebody starts to die and we start to lose them and we lose that sense of connection, I can recall that sensation and that memory and be like, oh, wait, there was a connection there. And that was my connection there. And so looking at the memories as ways to bring yourself back to your relationship versus just to the experience, if that's helpful. because we're drawn to people because we're drawn to them, right? We're drawn to their smell, to their look, to their laugh, the sound of their voice, the touch of their hand, the clothes that they chose to wear. I mean, so many memories are there for us in how we're together. And so we can start to be together as someone's dying and really appreciating these elements of them, not just the stories we create together. So I don't know, Sonia, does that answer your question? We sort of went off on
Yeah.
riffs.
Yeah, totally. I just kind of wanted to name that, it's just extra. I feel like it's extra pressure that we then put on ourselves to make something extra special. And to your point, there's specialness in just being and touching someone's skin and face and smelling them and looking at their clothing. Like we don't necessarily need a production. And that's not to say anyone who wants a production is bad, like go get it. But also resting into moments of just day to day feels important too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and because there are so many more moments of day to day. That's the other piece that I'll say is when we think about sort of grading or quantifying which moments mattered more, there are certainly moments that were harder and moments that are easier. But there are a bazillion moments that we have with a partner over a lifetime that we sort of discount, and they don't even come into the equation all of a sudden when we're in this heightened state of distress. So to be able to like reflect and be like, oh wait, I had thousands of moments with this person and they're all still within me and they all existed, is another sort of different expanded way of being with the grief. And maybe Heather, that kind of speaks to what we're moving into, this moving in and out, moving towards and away from grief. Oh my God, it's already 11:46. Sorry, I didn't realize what time it was.
Oh. Well, no, I think there's a there was a This American Life that was on some years ago, and I came across a story of a couple. Uh, their names I'm blanking right now. It's like Karen Stabby and some kind of Mondi Carter. And they're improv actors, and they shared this experience of having cared for Karen's mother at home while she was living and dying with Alzheimer's. And I know it's a different relationship than maybe when we're focused on, but what I really took away from it was there was this way in which their capacity of improv actors became a source of, of there was a skill in being able to join with Karen's mother and her Alzheimer's by just going along with the yes and of improv, like whatever her reality was. But I remember what was interesting about it too is that Karen's partner, Mondi, at times had an easier time doing that because it was not his mom. He loved her and there's a close bond, but sometimes the moving towards that place of just being with our person is actually, it requires us to touch into our deepest grief of losing our person. So it's sometimes we're able to do that a little bit with a little bit more ease. Like I imagine Ladybird, the client you were talking about, going to visit her husband at the facility. There were probably days where she was more able to join with him in honoring like his new reality and this new relationship. And there were other days that really touched much more into her grief.
Mhm.
And there's not a right or wrong in that. It is absolutely how we how we sometimes they're so close to each other. These places of intimacy will become the places of our loss.
Yeah.
And so they touch into each other and we move closer, further away from them at any given time.
Yeah, and we find different people to connect to, which is also hard. There's a beauty in that and there's a sadness in that. So the person she would have normally cried to or been
Yeah.
frustrated with would have been her husband, but she couldn't do that. And so she could do that with me. And it wasn't the same. I'm not her intimate partner. I wasn't able to understand her fully or know all of the things that they knew about each other and between each other, but there was a connection that could be made. And so we start to to reach towards the scaffolding that is there for us to stay in our lives. And that's another place of, where the separation happens, right? When the person is starting to die, they're leaving the scaffolding. They're starting to pull away from the very thing that you actually, I don't want to say need to, but can lean into, right? So you're leaning into something that they're leaning away from. And that has a really different quality to it. And part of staying in the world of the living is being with people who are living. It doesn't mean that you feel happy about it. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that you like it or that you want to. But but beings are here to hold us, right? And so that has its own quality of being able to move into a different type of grief than the person who's dying. Their grief will be a little bit different, a lot different actually than what you're experiencing. I don't know why I keep saying a little bit. It's not a little bit. It's significantly different. Sonia, I'm curious too if there's, go ahead and you can switch the slide. If there's, I guess I just spoke to that because I'm realizing we only have 10 more minutes. If there, if anyone has been posting questions, I have not been looking at the chat, or if there's anyone with a thought out there. I think we're sort of saying similar things a lot, about recognizing that relating in partnership when someone is dying is different than relating to somebody when they're not dying. It just has a lot of differences. And you're both in sort of an isolated experience and a shared experience that, Heather, you said so beautifully. It's like there are points of connection and there are points of separation, right? And it's really not so much that there's a way to master that. It's just about acknowledging, oh, there's going to be points of separation. There's going to be points of connection, and just kind of holding that as like a mantra. There's going to be points of separation. There's going to be points of connection. And when they arise, being with them, and when they're not there, hopefully finding people that you can express your distress with. It might not be your partner. And that's something that Heather and I have actually shared in this work, through metal, is being able to meet someone and maybe meeting them as a couple and then encouraging them to meet separately with somebody else so that they can each have an experience of being fully held and seen in their experience, in your experience, without it being a competition or needing to always rise and fall to meet the other person's experience.
Yeah. Ladybird, to your point, or to your question, Laura does have a question. She said, can you speak more to the difference between the grief the person with the illness is experiencing versus the grief of the partner caretaker?
There's anything coming? It's a vast territory.
And sometimes, things that come to me immediately, I'd be curious what you think, Laura and Ladybird too, like, it's almost like the mirror opposite sometimes of what the other person's experiencing, right? So for example, like, I think for the person who is dying, there may be ways in which grieving the capacities that they once had to be able to show up as a partner, as a parent, as a friend, it is so hard and painful to let go of those parts of ourselves and still feel like we are lovable, worthwhile, that we matter if we can't be in the world the way we used to. And we're watching everybody around us moving into this place of caregiving. We may feel like a burden. We may feel like, now that I can't reciprocate in the same way, that sense of helplessness, or like, and I think sometimes it gets mirrored in a different way, which is not blaming that person at all for what's happened, right? And also, I miss the person that I could co-parent with. I miss the person that I used to be able to, be in the world with, go travel with. I miss having that physical connection where we could just be physically intimate without it, evoking so much, maybe, maybe pain or complication. And it's not that they are not a burden, but my love for them like I want to hold this with them. I want to be able to hold this with them. And I'm aware too that it is so much bigger than any one of us can do on our own. So I wonder sometimes if it's almost like looking in a mirror, but not being in the same, it's not in the same plane of existence. It's something on either side of that lens.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not on the same plane of existence. I think that's the part that makes it so hard because you're existing together. But from, conversations that people who, as they're dying, have shared with me, they're they're grieving leaving, which is different than grieving a moment of loss. So everyone staying behind is anticipating a moment of loss, and they're going to continue in this known reality. The person dying is not anticipating a moment of loss. Oh, something just happened. My
I
computer,
stopped
sorry.
sharing so we could
Oh,
look at your faces.
oh, I'm like, whoa, the meeting is over.
Just me.
Um, this shared loss, but like you're actually fundamentally going towards something you've never done before. And regardless of your spiritual, religious practices, beliefs, there's an unknown quality, and there's also an untethering, there's a releasing of what you're living in now. The person who's living isn't doing any of that. The person who's living is watching this happen and then going to process it in the same space. And so it couldn't be more different. And there's a shared quality of like, oh, we've had this life together, we've made it to this point together, we're going to go through this moment, and you're going to experience it differently than I am, and then you're going to be gone and I'm going to still be here. So we don't know, I don't know what people when they die, what they experience or don't experience, or what I don't know anything, actually. I'll just be really honest. I know nothing. So I have no idea what they're going through, but I know what happens on the planet Earth when someone dies. I know what that experience is like. And um, to me, it's pretty different. Yeah.
Noha was just saying that she liked Ladybird's describing the movement of connection and separation and mentioning that distress may prevent us from remembering all those moments that preceded this moment and being able to bring them into this moment and inhabiting those moments of connection and beauty. So just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, because when I think about people that were in an intimate part of my life that are no longer there, I miss the sound of their coffee cup, right? I miss the sound of their movement in the house. I miss the smell. I miss those daily millions of cumulative moments that created a presence. It's the presence. And hopefully we find ways to access that presence with inside of us, and in community, not just privately, but and allow the person who's dying to experience their reality differently. That's also the challenge and the gift that support can offer, for people and couples around being with their partner and being separate. It's like, oh, wow, we can do this together and we can do it separately too. And that's okay. We're not crazy or bad, or, I need to go have a date with my friends. Even though my husband's dying, I should never leave the space. It's okay.
Yeah,
Probably could talk about it a longer time. So many
I'm sure we could
things.
talk about for hours each of these things. If anyone else has a question in these last few moments or just a comment, thank you so much for being with us. Yeah, I found myself getting emotional during a lot of that, just kind of thinking about the future state of my own relationships that will at some point enter this dynamic in one way or another. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true, right? But I mean, we're talking about something that is so painful to say out loud. I think for myself too, all of our relationships are existing in this temporal plane, right? We are here and then we are not at some point. And it is so crushing to live into that reality. I think it is almost how I cope sometimes that I don't. I don't
Mhm.
give all my attention there. I think there's a wisdom there too. Um, and yeah, so when we're describing what happens, we're describing some facts of life that are inherent to being alive. And what I think is, for me, even more salient is that we continue to know ourselves as people who we change, we grow, we lose, we grieve, we love, and we're not these static beings that only exist in one point of time. But our relationships, my friendships, my partnerships, past, present, future, are all a part of me. I take them with me now, and I will take them with me when I die. And I do not know what that means, and yet they are in me. And so I trust that too, as much as our relationships are of a moment, of a time. They're also like eternally in me. They don't go anywhere. That helps me, I think, at least bear the distance and the loss at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you both so much. Thank you everyone for being here, listening. We love doing these with you. Thank you so much, Ladybird and Heather. It was really
No, thanks for having. And please send other thoughts and comments if you have any more like other things that we didn't cover. I would love to know.
Yeah. Anyone on this call or anyone watching it on YouTube, you can always email us info@mentalhealth.com with a question or a thought or anything. The more we hear kind of about people's lived experiences, the richer this conversation gets. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.